Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Floyd, and today we are going to explore the essential tools that make stories work, the literary elements. These are sort of the ingredients every writer used to build a narrative. And by the end of the day, you will be able to identify and use them like pros. A narrative is essentially a story. It can be personal, fictional, or based on even real events. Narratives allows writers to express themselves creatively and emotionally. They're not just about what happened, they're about how it felt, what it meant, why it matters. Did you know the word narrative comes from the Latin word narrare, which means to tell? Can you think of a time that someone told a story and it made you laugh or cry? Literary elements are sort of like the DNA of storytelling. Every piece of literature, whether it's a novel, a poem, a play, a short story, will have the literary elements. They help us to understand what we're reading and gives writers the tools to shape meaning. There are 9 essential literary elements in writing: language, plot, character, setting, style, conflict, theme, perspective, and mood and tone. These are sort of like a toolkit. Every great story must have them. Language is how we communicate ideas and emotions. It's more than just words, it's rhythm and tone and style. Literature exists in over 6,900 languages worldwide, and each one has its own flavor and nuance. Have you ever read something in another language or dialect? How did it change your experience? Language is the most important literary element because without it, we would not be able to communicate these ideas and beliefs or feelings. Language can be in writing, it could be verbal, it could be body language or sign language, even. Plot is the sequence of events in a story, it's the what happens. Most stories follow a structured plot called the Freytag's pyramid. The Freytag's pyramid consists of an exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, and denouement. Characters are essentially the heart of any story. Every narrative must have at least one character. They can be people, animals, or even objects. There are many types of characters, such as the protagonist and antagonist, but every story must have at least one. Who's your favorite character from a book or a movie? Why? Setting of the time and place is where the story happens and when the story happens. It's the backdrop that influences everything, such as the mood, the plot, even the character decisions. A vivid setting can make a story unforgettable. Did you know that some authors spend years researching settings to make them feel real? Style. Style is how an author tells a story. It is the way they write. Some are poetic, some are blunt, some are humorous. Style helps readers connect with the narrative and sets the tone. Conflict is extremely important. Conflict is the struggle between opposing forces. It creates tension and keeps the readers interested. There are 2 Types of conflict: internal conflict and external conflict. Without conflict, a narrative will be boring. These two types of conflict will lead the way to the six types of conflicts, or six examples of conflict. That is man versus self, man versus man versus society, man versus nature, man versus supernatural, and man versus technology. Make sure you're able to distinguish between these examples of conflict when you see them. Can you think of a movie or book with one of these types of conflicts? Now, the best narratives will have a combination of the majority of these conflicts, if not all of them. Theme. Theme is the moral lesson or universal truth in the story. It is what the story is trying to teach us about human life, about the nature of humanity. Themes can be simple or complex, but they must be a complete sentence. The theme is usually something everyone goes through. It is a statement about human life. It is universal. It is true today, and it'll be true tomorrow. It is true here in America, and it's true in Australia. Theme in literature can enlarge one's understanding of life, but it can also focus the work of literature. Again, it must be a complete sentence. You will never state a theme as one or two words. And remember, there's rarely, if ever, only one theme in a narrative. So just because you read a narrative and come up with a lesson doesn't mean that it's the only lesson that that narrative teaches. Here are a few example themes or universal truths. It is better to give than to receive. The truth will set you free. Love conquers all. A friend is there through thick and thin. Family is worth more than gold. Always be true to yourself. Success takes hard work and dedication. There are a few ways that we can come up with a theme, but this one works quite well. As you read, always ask yourself questions. What is this story trying to teach me? Try to figure out the author's view about life by looking at how the characters and the people in the narrative behave. The theme expresses the author's opinion or raises a question about human nature or the meaning of human experience. Another great strategy is to look for symbols. Ask yourself what this symbol represents, and then ask yourself, what am I supposed to learn about this symbol? Let's take a look at an example. When Katie Klein invited Messy Missy to her house to work on their biology project, she had no idea what a visit from Messy Missy entailed. First of all, it was raining and Messy Missy neither bothered to take her boots off nor thoroughly wipe them on the doormat. Then Missy Missy ate a bag of hot chips on Katie Klein's white bedspread without asking. Messy Missy is a sloppy eater too, so hot chip powder got all over the bedspread. Katie Klein tried to be polite and ignore Messy Missy's sloppy behavior, but then Messy Missy threw her chip wrapper on the floor. Offended, Katie Klein pretended that she was sick and asked Messy Missy to leave. The next day, Katie Klein asked the teacher if she could work by herself. After Katie explained the situation, the teacher allowed Katie to work alone. Messy Missy almost finished the assignment alone, but she spilled grape soda all over it and quit. So, as you develop themes for this passage, ask yourselves questions. What am I supposed to learn from this passage? What is the moral of the story? Or you can also look for symbols. What does Katie Clean represent? What does Messy Missy represent? And then ask yourself, what am I supposed to learn about what they represent? So come up with a good theme for this narrative. Next is perspective and point of view. Perspective is the narrator's attitude or lens. The narrator's attitude or lens. Point of view is how much the narrator knows. For first person point of view, we'll use I pronouns. Second person point of view, you pronouns. Third person point of view, he, she, him, or her pronouns. Identifying the point of view is quite easy because all we have to do is look at the pronouns. But identifying the perspective is a little bit more challenging. You have to really describe and identify who the narrator is, who is telling this story. So we can determine the perspective in a few different ways. Is the narrator a father? If so, then the story is told through a father's perspective. Is the narrator a child? If so, then the story is told through a child's perspective. We can go on and on. Is it a teenager's perspective? An employer's versus the employee's perspective? A dog's perspective or the dog owner's perspective? Remember, perspective is a lens. If the lens changes, then this entire story will change as well. And again, when we identify the points of view, we're just looking for pronouns. First person, second person, third person omniscient, or third person limited. Now let's go back to the story about Messy Missy. How would that story change if it were told in second person point of view? How would that story change if it were told through Messy Missy's perspective instead of Katie Clean's perspective? The entire narrative can change just if we change the perspective or points of view. So again, when we consider these words, perspective and point of view, sometimes we hear them and they're used interchangeably, but they're not. They have their distinct definitions. A perspective is how the narrator or speaker identifies, but the point of view is how much of the story can the narrator tell. Now let's talk about attitude. Now, attitude can be viewed in two different ways. That is the tone, which is how the narrator or speaker feels, and the mood. The mood is how the reader feels. The mood is always a reflection of the tone. The narrator will set the tone, and then that will determine how you feel as the reader. So again, tone is how the narrator feels, mood is how the reader feels. Authors use the setting, they will use word choice, they will use sentence structure to create the tone, which shapes the mood. For example, if the tone is angry, then the mood might be tense or scared. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is our lesson, our reteach lesson on the literary elements. These literary elements are the foundation of storytelling. You must be able to identify them so that you can then analyze them. Understanding them helps you read better, write better, and think more deeply about the stories around you and the stories that you create every day. So, as we conclude, think about this question. Which literary element do you think is most important in your own writing and why? That's all I have for us today, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great day. Do great things. Mr. Floyd out.